Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. So my name is Johanna Kuzmin-Karvaev. I am one of the authors of the report Artists, Designers and Business in Cross-Sector Collaboration, Untapped Potential for Systemic Change, that we are now about to make a summary presentation of. So as we just said that, we saw that we are, well, a diverse group of people here online today in many different ways and from many different sectors, and that is a wonderful opportunity. And our report also addresses a wide audience of professionals from corporate and culture sector, as well as from policy. So before we go into the topic, I would just like to mention a couple of practical details. From today, you can download the report on the Artisans of Innovation website. And I think that there will also be a link, if there is not already, to that in the chat window. We have foreseen about 45 minutes plus Q&A time for today. And also what is important to say that this event is recorded. So we thought that after the presentations and the conversations with our speaker, we will, if time allow, then take in some questions over the chat box. And as we have little time, we will just take our freedom to select a couple of them if there are many. And the purpose today is then really to engage in discussion with panel members regarding the value and potential of cross-sector collaboration between artists, designers, and business, and of course outline the key findings and recommendations. So a warm welcome first to our speakers, whom I would like to introduce. They're contributing kindly with their time today. Ariane Bertoine-Antal is a professor at WZB Berlin Social Science Center in Germany and at Audencia Business School in Nantes, France. Her research on artistic interventions in organizations has examined practices and experiences in France, Germany, Spain, and Sweden from the perspective of artists, employees, and organizations. That has led to probably more than 60 publications. In her previous, it builds on her previous work in organizational learning, organizational culture, CSR, and global responsibility. Peter Handke is a conductor and associate fellow at the Oxford Said Business School. Since 2003, Peter has delivered numerous experimental learning sessions on conducting leadership at Said Business School, including sessions on the Oxford Strategic Leadership Program. He runs similar artistic workshops focusing on leadership from the conductor's point of view at many other business schools and corporate leadership academies around the world. Benoit Lejeune, welcome, is a head of transformation and sustainability at VUCA, a water distribution company in Belgium. Benoit's role and responsibilities have been extensive. They include non-executive member of the board, manager of the transformation team, change management office, the project management office. He has been responsible and accountable for communication of the transformation and development of the company's culture. He has been instrumental in enabling strategy execution and the development of organizational and human dynamics. He is an advisor, influencer, and he considers himself mainly an energizer. Bonga Ntuli, I hope I pronounced your name right, is a strategy director at Royal Haskoning DHV. It is an international engineering and project management consultancy, and Bonga is based in South Africa. He has previously been a business unit director for development and performance at different units of Royal Haskoning DHV. He has been responsible for hundreds of staff in South Africa, Nigeria, and Mozambique. Earlier, he was responsible for strategy development, sales, finance, HR, internal processes, and innovations and alignment with other business units. Welcome to all of you. So I will now get into a bit why we have actually done this work. So I think that we in the research team had quite different reasons. Some of them were similar. We had some agreements. From my side, I have been for a long time driven by the valorization or valorizing culture and the arts through economic and instrumental values. And I have also experienced the backsides with the art sectors, poor living conditions. And I really believe that there is an issue with offer and demand for artists. There are maybe simply too many artists and also maybe too many designers to some extent in relation to the market demand. So that results in poor conditions for these professionals, and they are forced often into underpaid labor where they often cannot use their skills in motivating or satisfying ways. And I have also asked myself the question on what would actually, or what should the responsibility be of higher education in these sectors in terms of curriculum around awareness raising on how can one use one's skills, also about other business models. And on the other hand, I have experienced the impact of artists in business environment, and I'm really convinced of the practice. As a cultural and creative sector professional, this practice is really about unleashing further the potential of the creative economy. It's about that the sectors being a driver for the larger economy. It's about opportunity. And I know that the way into the practice for artists and designers is a question of mindset, and that needs role models, inspiration, and training in order to actually get there. And I believe that one of the most interesting parts with the analysis that we have made is the cross-sector approach, including the expertise also from a corporate innovation specialist who is not with us here today. It was of key importance to actually analyze and agree on our statements from a cross-sector perspective, because, as you may understand, that is really what we believe is the only sustainable answer to this practice. It should come from a wider perspective. So for us, internally on a micro level, it meant that the journey was done in a true cross-sector manner, and we also met confrontation and frustration in our discussions. That is the part of what cross-sector collaboration is. You collaborate with people who have different ways of speaking, of doing, of analyzing, but that's the whole point. And without that, nothing novel can be created. What made us set out on this journey was really the inquiry about why cross-sector collaboration between artists, designers, and the corporate world is not more established than it is today. Our drive has really been the systemic change and the improved sustainability that this practice can lead to if it is formalized, professionalized, and orchestrated. So, Kawar, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Joanna, for that introduction to the webinar. So first of all, I'd like to reiterate the welcome to our panel of speakers and, of course, to the audience who have taken time out to join us today. So a quick introduction. So I'm the co-author of the report with Joanna, and my background is actually in the field of computing and digital innovation and transformation. So we have Joanna with a deep background in culture and creative, and myself, on the other hand, who comes from what's effectively the world of finite state machines, computing and digital systems. So that's very interesting. It's an interesting combination there. But actually, Joanna and I are talking, and that's the crucial thing. We're talking, we're understanding, and we are co-creating. And actually, this is the essence of our report, and it's the essence of this webinar. It's all about the possibilities and the opportunities of cross-disciplinary and cross-sector collaboration. So just before I move on to some of the key findings, you might be sat there asking, well, what's my interest in this? So Joanna's, I think, conveyed her motivation. So for me, well, first of all, the discipline of computing has in many ways always worked in a cross-sectoral manner to codify and create applied solutions in healthcare, transport, lifestyle, energy, across the board. Actually, there isn't really one sector out there that hasn't been impacted by computing or digital. And as a practitioner, I want to see that continue and evolve. Now, secondly, I see the world as an increasingly networked society with low friction, accessible systems. It's going to change how we engage with the world around us, what our experiences will be, how they're going to change. So whilst all of this will be underpinned by technology, that's pretty much undoubtable, it has to be human-centered. And the creation of that world and those new experiences can't be created in silos. It has to be a multi-dimensional process, and we all need to be part of that creation process as well. So that's my motivation. Okay, so I'm going to move on to some of the key findings. I'm conscious I only have around 4 or 5 minutes, so this is fairly quick. So apologies in advance.
Sorry to interrupt you. Could we say something about the methodology possibly before?
Yeah, I was just about to mention that, Joanna. Thanks for the prompt. I did say you have a better memory than I do. So actually, in undertaking this work, we made sure we practiced what we're preaching here, and that's ensuring a cross-disciplinary and cross-sectoral composition of the team. And what that gave us is a very multi-dimensional lens with a wider field of vision, which we adopted rather than a siloed one-dimensional perspective to the construction of the study and also to the analysis. So we made sure we included members drawn from the fields of corporate innovation, technology, and of course the culture and the creative sectors there. So we found that was really important. It was challenging at times, right down to language, terminology, but ultimately we got there in terms of listening, understanding, synthesizing, and harmonizing our mindset. So that was really important for us. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the key findings, and it's at this point I'm going to share a screen with you. So let's hope the technology works. Okay, so can you see this diagram?
Yeah.
Joanna, can you see that diagram?
Yeah. Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, so what we've got here then is a quick visualization, actually. So we effectively had a grounded theory-based approach here where we analyzed the data we had, we synthesized that, and we had 15 emergent themes. So this is a visualization of that. And clearly I can't go through all 15 themes today. So I picked 4, which I'll outline for you today. So I think the first thing to say is it's important to note that these themes are in fact relevant for collaboration on both a macro level and at micro level. So by macro level, what we mean here is policy orchestration, region level, country level, and just making sure systemically the whole discipline evolves in terms of cross-sectoral collaboration. At a micro level, we mean institutional level. So whether it's a business, a non-profit, an educational institution. So we wanted to make sure we're addressing across the board here from macro to micro level. So the first one I want to touch upon is the culture of innovation, and you'll see that on the top right of the diagram here. And you know, culture and innovation is extremely well documented in the literature. So, you know, we're not going to recover that ground. And it was of high intensity in our work. And what we mean by intensity, it's the degree of concern which emerged. So clearly, a culture of innovation was of high intensity, which means for us, it was of almost critical concern and importance, and frequently occurred in the conversations which we were having there. So with culture of innovation, we found that fostering the right culture of innovation is actually a significant concern in organizational evolution and transformation. And arguably, it's the determinant for creative innovation, in fact. And organizations are complex beasts and entities, and charting what's potentially new ground for them regarding cross-sectoral collaboration can require cultural change. It's about going beyond their immediate spatial context, the immediate context of how they work, and working across sectors and across discipline. So that cultural aspect perhaps requires some initial engineering. And I say that in context of, you know, understanding culture, whether it's organic or top down, but it has to be steered, hence the word engineering there. And it's about democratization of innovation as well, where the workforce is empowered, they're encouraged to innovate, and it's about simplifying the innovation process as well in the increasingly complex nature of organizations that we see today. It's about making it accessible and agile and actually being risk inclined and failing forward as well. To do that, we think it needs a composition of a number of things: mindset, trust, respect, agility, skills, talent, curiosity, enthusiasm, passion, leadership, as well as, the nature of leadership is changing in organizations, and of course, diversity. And diversity is another theme which is at the heart of cross-sectoral collaboration. It's about differences, congruence, and harmonizing those. So these are all some of the conditions for a culture of innovation, but no doubt you've heard about this before. So some of this isn't necessarily new, but what is new, we think, is that there are fundamental tenets of cross-sectoral innovation, and I've got 5 here. The first one, for example, is innovation can't happen without creativity and different perspectives. That ties into diversity and differences and multidimensional thinking. The second one is having a holistic mindset, and systems thinking is important. So seeing micro and macro level perspectives on the overall composite value and impact that can yield. Partnerships is important. That's the third one. So innovation can be driven by partnering. It can be catalyzed through collaboration, co-creation, trust, where everybody is equally invested with a shared consciousness, with a win-win mindset of mutual value. The fourth one I've got is thinking the impossible is possible, actually, and making that happen. And finally, being risk inclined. So these are some of the tenets that we've identified there. Okay, I'll move on quickly to the next one, and that's professional competency development, which is quite an interesting one. I think, first of all, our view is that there has to be some form of professionalization of practice, and that non-professionalized and informal practice is unlikely to yield a critical mass in moving forward and seeing the reward of that collaboration in cross-sectoral collaboration. So by professionalization, what we mean, for example, is that artists and designers may want to or consider enhancing their practice in terms of the corporate sector. So taking their brilliant work that they already do and championing that, and talking about skills, competencies, and experience which stem from that creative process, and that can be translated into a corporate context. So that's what we mean by professionalization here. This also then includes framing this competency and expertise in a manner that goes beyond the cliches of creativity, and in a way that can be transferred, that's really important, through different methods and discipline. And actually this links to codification, which is of a particular interest to me. And that's, how do we codify something like this? Because in order to convey, we have to codify and have meaning associated with that. Now, from a corporate context, what professionalization might mean is actually for those involved in innovation or leading innovation is to identify points of linkage and interfaces with the culture and the creative sectors, who the relevant contacts and roles are, what the nature of the dialogue is, the language, something that we in fact experienced in the process of this study ourselves, optimal points of intervention, and how to interact with artists and designers as well. So in terms of cross-sector collaboration, what this is about, we think a commitment to professional competency development is actually important, both for artists and designers and also for the corporate sector. Okay, the next one I'm going to go through is discovery. And what discovery is all about, it's about observing and understanding the links between business, industry, and the arts and the design professions, and more so trying to understand or discover and understand the potential value and impact of working together and what that can yield. And actually, significant aspects of discovery as a theme were present in both the corporate sector and the creative and culture sector data that we had. And on this particular diagram, you'll notice it's a blue and a pink circle combined. And that actually represents the fact it's of very mutual concern here. So fundamentally, we have to discover before we can decode and understand. And because this is about working beyond your immediate sector, that's an essential process because meaning provides the basis for common understanding. And there's a whole multitude of multidimensional aspects there which have to be identified. And that can only happen through the process of discovery. Skills actually are a really good illustration here, and that's, there's a whole wealth of brilliant skills in the creative and the culture sectors: adaptability, systems thinking, curiosity, etc., complex problem solving. But actually, discovering these and decoding these and then re-articulating these in context of the corporate sector is a process of discovery. So understanding how they can be leveraged to work across sectors. So that aspect of the issue relating to skills offer and demand, for example, is one that can be addressed through effective discovery. And it does need, insights, understanding across all levels of an organization to create the creative intelligence which is needed, which can lead to that creative corporate harmony, in fact. Okay, and the fourth one I think I'm going to cover is impact and business value. And I think one of our guests here, Ariana, talked about this in certainly the conversations we had with her. And that's, how do we actually identify and measure the value of cross-sector collaboration? What's the value, for example, of an artist or a designer going into a corporate environment? So what this requires from our point of view is actually a re-evaluation of how organizations measure. So the approach to measurement and the associated techniques, well, they need to be scoped and they need to be changed to measure more effectively that multi-dimensional input of artists and designers, so that outcomes are more effectively captured, or they're recorded, captured, and again conveyed. This is important because we live in that increasingly data-driven society, so data matters. So if we can record that data, then actually that can help in establishing and reinforcing trust, credibility, and also showing that cross-sector collaboration really, really does work. So this needs a mindset shift from how we measure to how we could measure to fully capture the artistic and the designer-based intervention with the corporate sector. So that goes beyond aesthetics. It involves changing how we think about aesthetics and codifying that using appropriate metrics in a way that all stakeholders can evolve. Okay, so that's 4 of the 15 themes. Clearly, there's lots to discuss there and lots to debate, but time today won't allow us to do that. And before I move on, I will say that all of these 15 themes have a deep interrelationship with each other, so they're not to be considered in isolation. And of course, the report, there's 33 pages of content in the report which talks about these themes and other key findings as well. So Joanna, on that note, I'm going to hand over back to you now to talk about some of the other key findings.
Thank you so much, Kawar. So yes, as Kawar said, these themes are strongly interconnected. And, while we were writing this, we realized, but this is connected to that, and that is connected to this. And so, it's really like a chain. So there are, of course, many favorites of mine, about the belief systems, about bridging the gap, and going more into detail on creative and culture innovation, culture, creative intelligence, and the similarity, but part of this have already been said, as they are actually all interconnected. So I will speak a bit more about conclusions and findings that were of transversal importance and reappeared in many of the mentioned themes. For example, awareness raising. Awareness raising on the existing gap, the different belief systems, of the potential, of the skills match that exists and needs to be known, about best practices, of the need of professional competency development, of synergies as innovation, etc., etc. Awareness raising was really transversal, appearing in the analysis. Another conclusion is really the need of orchestration of practice. Orchestration of people, belief systems, and sectors is really an issue. There is a wealth of knowledge, practice, and evidence available, but the practice lacks championing until today. Culture brokerage is definitely something that has appeared as a key element. And culture brokerage is explained also in the report. You could also talk about intermediary, that one term that I know that Ariane is favorable to, I think. Facilitator, middleman, these different terms can be seen. So this function of this person, or this practice of culture brokerage, organizations possibly as well, that's an essential help and support in order to establish a practice that is really still in a cradle in comparison to where it could be. So the culture broker is essential, as it's sometimes just too complicated for artists and companies to just find one another and succeed in working together in mutually beneficial manner. Collaborations can always be done, but what is then the outcome and the quality of that? The knowledge and understanding spanning across sectors is really needed for a culture broker, and it is then often supplied by this function. I come back a bit to impact, but impact measurements and evidence. And this seems to have been a really nitty-gritty question until now, really, and it has gained a lot of attention during our process. But the practice is not hindered by a lack of evidence. There is, again, a wealth of evidence, cases, experience, and knowledge. There are different tools for measuring impact that have been suggested, and different ways for doing measurements, which includes both qualitative and quantitative approaches. What we feel seem to be essential is really to set the metrics for measurement as a collaborative manner across the sectors. And the measurement of cross-sector collaboration is always unique per case and per type of interaction. And one important point is the offer and the demand of skills and the understanding of this. So there is a huge gap in the understanding of this until today. Artists and designers, they really have the skills and competencies that can be embedded in a range of contexts in the corporate sector. And we are in this report talking about both artists and designers, which is their skills is not exactly the same thing. And even among different artistic disciplines, there are variations, as well as among different design disciplines. And literature and thoughts, specific type of topic, specific media channels, they have, you have been able to see a lot of data on skills in today's economy and the fourth industrial revolutions. And there are rarely parallels really to the ones of artists. And many of the skills that you can see in this discourse, again, this Kavar mentioned complex problem solving, systems thinking, collaboration, ability to experiment, entrepreneurship, empathy, and creative process mindset. They are inherent to the creative process. And creative process is something that unites all the art disciplines and to also some extent designers. And of course, one can debate further about the differences between artists and designers in terms of functions, values, and processes, but it's certainly about aesthetic expression. The VUCA world, the volatile, uncertain, and complex and ambiguous world, is something that is written a lot about today. And it is repeatedly mentioned as challenges for companies. But have anyone thought about that the artistic professions, they're actually permeated with VUCA due to the uncertainty of self-employment conditions in this sector, and again, the inherent risk-taking nature and the uncertain nature of the creative process. As a last point on the skills, in our interviews, we got a striking match actually between the skills that interviewees thought that the company needed in order to stay relevant and innovate, and also between the ones that they thought that the artist could bring to the companies as skills and competencies. So anyway, all of this and more do we find important, of key importance in order to establish the practice. And I don't know if you said that, Kawar, I just wanted to underline that again, that of course, all this that we have mentioned, it applies both to corporate and culture and creative sectors. So I would like to invite Ariane and Peter to a couple of questions to ask you. I would like to ask you a couple of questions. So I would like first to see, what do you think about our statement that this practice is not more established today because of, it's not because of a lack of evidence, but rather by lack of orchestration? That's the first one. And the second one related is, of course, what are your thoughts and reasons for why the practice has not become more established? I don't know who, Ariane, would you like to start?
Sure. I want to back up one moment first, and similar to the way that you two started, explain what got me into this field. Why did I start researching it? And not because I am a purely intellectual researcher who wants to pose impossible questions. What motivated me to start it was when I was working with managers. We had week-long programs. This at the time was with Ashridge Management College. We had week-long programs with top managers from around the world, and we thought after they'd worked so hard, we'd give them a bit of something special. And we had an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours in some form of the arts. I was so struck by the effect that experiencing something in the world of the arts, what impact it had on the way they were thinking about their business issues, about their own career development, about their work and about their lives, that I think we had a greater impact in those 3 hours than in all the business models, practices, exercises we had during the rest of the week, if I'm really honest. And that stimulated me to wonder if I could see this happening. It was palpable, it was beautiful, it was powerful. If I could see this happening when we took managers out of their normal work environment and put them into this special development program that their companies were sending them on, what would happen if we did it back in the organization and did it with a greater number of people within a single organization? What would happen? And there's where my research brain got clicked. And as you said, Johanna, my research was based beforehand. I'd been working very much in organizational learning, so I'm interested in learning. And I had then the great advantage of being able to read some studies that had started, for example, by Lotte Darso, and for example, also the work that Peter Hanke had been doing, realizing people have started researching it. Already in the early 2000s, we started having evidence. This works. So I had my palpable human direct evidence by seeing managers. There was already research evidence coming out. And then later, as I worked and talked with managers around the world in these various projects and asking them what evidence they use in order to figure out, is this worth the company money? Is this worth time? I was really struck that the kind of answers they gave were how they observe the human beings in their organizations. They're no longer shadows of themselves. They look us in the eye. They talk with us. They address issues with us. It was an activation of people in the organization through their interaction they'd had with the arts. So I agree with you that we have lots of evidence. What we need is more people who have the courage to try it out. And I think that a big problem is who is asking for evidence and what kind of evidence are they asking for? If we keep on asking the same kind of questions, we're never going to get new answers. So I think that I appreciate your study because I think it builds on existing work in a very concise way. So we're having now, I think you talk about 30 minutes to present it. The way you wrote it makes it very accessible. So for those of you who are listening, I strongly recommend you download the report and read it because it's very accessible knowledge and very practical. We don't need a lot of new metrics. We need people who are trying things out, and on the basis of their personal experience, they can stand up to boards. They can stand up to other organizations and say, I know it works because I've seen it. I've been there, and my people are showing me how it works. It's showing me as a manager how I can listen more effectively to people because I've seen these impacts through their interaction with the arts. So I think that's for me the most important thing about what are the problems in metrics, but also how easy it is to get the evidence. You just need to watch and listen and get the feedback from managers and employees and also the artists who've been doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And you, Peter, what do you think about this?
Yes, I have a lot also to say, and can carry on forever with this. In these 20 years, and also what Ariane is talking about. At that time when we met in that situation, I was a part of the Copenhagen Business School Research, Art and Leadership Research Center. It is unfortunately closed again now, and my practice now in Oxford. In Oxford, the Side Business School claims to have educated leaders for 800 years. And as management and organizational studies have only existed for a century and a half maximum, we have to look back in history, which is also some of the point of I've been quoted for in the report at the Renaissance and the Age of Enlightenment, where these non-silo meetings were much more doable or easy accessible, which is what we need to do in our society today. And this is very much the reason of why this sort of practice is not growing. I've been a part of it for 20 years now, nearly, and that is it is growing in a certain way. But I will give you a few answers to that in a moment and why it is there. But first of all, I think it's important to understand that this silos of society exist everywhere, and it's also in the arts. Very silo-based, you just can't say that art is one sector. It's not possible. If you're a performance artist, if you're a musician or a theater person, whether you're a director or actor, so forth, your silos are completely different than fine arts silos. And the ecosystems of how you build a career, how you make yourself known, how you be getting recognized by your peers and so forth. All these systems are extremely delicate and highly specialized in any sense as any part of our society. And that's why I support what you do in your report and the way you've set it up. There is many more dimensions that just corporate culture or art, how you say it, the silos are so specialized, and the turfs, if I could say like this, particularly in the arts, are very difficult to overcome. I will also play the devil's advocate already here and question the notion of artists being so incredibly inspiring, multifaceted, and diverse. It's not true. We are so focused with our microscopes all the time on our tiny little bit of the world and nothing else. Hugely specialized, which is not to mock any one of the artists. Of course, there are processes that are good here, but the paradigm I think we need to get out of is this sort of 20th century industrialized or post-industrialized society thinking that I'm an artist, I'm a conductor, and I fill in this box. I can then fight my way out of that box or create something with a silo next to it. I think we should look back, and what I'm also quoted for with the Renaissance, if famous characters like Leonardo da Vinci, but you can say any Renaissance person, also the Lorenzo da Medici, the ruler of Florence for many years. He was a philosopher, a lute player, and painter even. These kind of multifaceted aspects of the single human being is what is important, which is also what Oxford currently on. And I would say, play back to the questions of why is this practice not growing? And look upon it from the artistic point of view. That is, an artist will ask, what's in it for me? Will I be recognized by my peer artist because I work for a company and make some creative processes? Not really. Will I become famous for my art because I do this? Not really. I will not break through as an artist because I do, in my case, I teach conducting for leaders in Oxford. Having said that, it's a sort of discovery thing, which I'm very satisfied by what you mentioned before, the discoveries and the professionalization is hugely important, that there becomes a sort of a canvas of opportunity also for artists to do this. And I constantly tell my colleagues about this, that my audience, if we can call it that, in the leadership development processes that I participate in, they remember my music the rest of their lives. It's so life transforming for them to be a part of what I do. When they are sitting in an audience nicely applauding a concert, they forget next week. And I think we need to find and revive the good arguments from the artist. Why is it satisfying and important? What can you be proud of as an artist to take
Exactly.
these sort of
and sorry, Peter, I just allow myself to interject there because this really much links to the other question that I had that you partly already actually answered. You know, what would you do in order to motivate the young artists and designers from different disciplines? Because I'm thinking that, you know, artists who contribute to with art addressing climate change and poverty, or, you know, a lot of socially engaged issues that exist. So what would you try to do in order to inspire them to the practice? What is needed to train them?
A really, really good question. I don't have a single answer to that, but I find it very important. And I think of course, the single artist can do something like I have done 20 years ago. I walked in the middle of nowhere by this and didn't get much praise for that. That's coming slowly. But I mean, finding role models and exactly what we mentioned before about the professionalization of things. So having a professional pride connected with that is somewhere we should find. And I think in this sort of, I live in Denmark, in the sort of Scandinavian context, I think a big duty could be addressed to the institutions, both the educational institutions and the art institutions, to create this path. This is a career opportunity for an artist to do this. Yeah. That's probably one of the answers. The other one is to just show our good results, like you're doing here, and probably it inspires me a bit to do to get a little more active and touch base again with people that I know are doing the same thing, and finding also the sort of measuring thing. I'm very in agreement about this, that what is the measuring? If you look at from an artistic point of view, it's quite inspiring to hear you talk about that. What are the measures for the successful artistic participation in this? That will change something significantly, I believe.
Thank you so much, Peter. So over to you now, Kawar. Kawar, do you hear? Do you
need to unmute? Classic.
I'll get the technology right one day, having spent a career working with it. So I was saying that was fascinating listening to the responses there to those questions. And there were certainly lots of thoughts going through my mind. I've made a couple of notes, which I'll come back to in the summary at the end of the webinar. Okay, so I've got a couple of questions for Bonga and Benoit. So thank you for being patient, first of all, with us here. And really, my questions are to do with the actual in situ context of artists and designers in an organization. And what can you say about that? So I know that you've got some ideas about how artists can help in a corporate environment. So could you perhaps elaborate on that in terms of your experience or how you think actual in situ engagement occurs? Bong, I'm going to throw that on to you first of all.
Okay, thanks very much. I think there is a study from Harvard which highlights that diversity can improve the financial performance of any organization. So when you talk about diversity, in this case, you're talking about people from different walks of life. So you also want not just on race or gender, but also in terms of thoughts. Okay? But also it requires very courageous leadership, Renaissance leadership, for this to happen. So what you find is the business is always trying to come up with solutions for very complex environments which we operate in, which were also highlighted earlier on in the presentation. And These complex situations require a lot of creativity, logic. So you also need a lot of different types of people to solve these problems. And what we're saying also is that there's no one sector of the economy that's got a monopoly of ideas of how to solve this. So collaboration, effective collaboration is actually very critical. And unfortunately, also in the corporate world, people behave based on how they're measured. Okay? And how do you actually measure effective collaboration, especially well amongst the people in corporate, but also partners across? I think for leadership, those are sort of there's a sort of the thinking that we should have going forward. Okay, but we should be encouraging business to obviously look across board in terms of solving these complex problems for society. But I think also going forward, it's going to be very much of a value-based economy that's going to be critical, especially after an example like COVID. So what value can you bring? I mean, then you say, well, everyone has got a value to add in any complex problems. But we need to create, I mean, leaders need to create a platform for this. Business needs to create a platform for this. But how do we do that? Because it also requires that leaders have an unconscious biasness in looking at the people that are involved in solving these problems. So there's quite a number of things that I've highlighted, which obviously business needs to look into and start challenging itself. So it means also the shareholders of these corporates needs to start asking the right questions. Because overall, you want to see most businesses will look at what is the legacy of this corporation or institution, okay? And also, some of these corporates are working in different parts of the world with globalization and all that. So it means that we have to look at a huge spectrum of how it affects different parts of society. But do those people have a say in how you come up with solutions? So inclusivity is going to be key going forward in corporate. Okay? And I think it's going to be quite a very challenging for leaders. But I think also the shareholders are going to be quite critical in all of this.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that very enlightening response there. So, I mean, for me, I think, businesses just cannot stay still. It's a land of agility, a world of agility. And I think in order to do that, they have to be capable of responding to all of these VUCA-based demands which are out there. And I think the aspect you raised about problem solving is crucial there. In other words, that there's a mission here, and that mission is to create or solve problems. It's directed, there's a purpose, and I think that purpose-driven goal is really important as the convening factor for working across sectors. So that's great. Thank you very much for that. Benoit, I'm going to throw that same question at you.
Give it to me. Yeah, well, I think I conduct change management projects. I help managers to execute their strategy. That's what I do. But in reality, what I do most of the time is to open up perspectives. I help people to change the perception they have on things, on the company, on who they are, on the way they manage their team. So I think, I'm a musician as well. So I play drums in the band since years. So, music and art to me is pretty much the same. It's something you can hold on to that helps you to open up perspective and see things differently. The second point I'd like to share is a really concrete example is that all the people here in this room are artists. You can draw, you can draw. And I'm using drawings in my workshops. And I'll give you one example. A few years ago, I was working with a financial director of a major retail company, and they wanted to outsource their accounting department outside of Europe, And the first thing I did in the workshop, I had the financial director, European director, and 3 other people. And the first thing I asked them to do was to draw the company. I just add that. So I put two main, big flip chart on the table. I handed a few markers, and I said, draw me the company. They looked at me like, what do you want? I mean, we are a financial guy. And I said, who cares? I mean, just draw the company. And so all of a sudden, in a minute, they were starting to draw the shops, the back office, and so on. And all of a sudden, they were fully 100% concentrated and focused on something just by using their creativity and drawing something. And the second question I ask is, draw me on that paper where the change is going to impact the company. And in an hour, you had the change and a mindset just by using, drawings. It wasn't about, artistic drawing that we are talking about, but my point was that anyone can draw, and you can use that in a workshop, and we can discuss a lot about the business of artists. And my mission, if I can call it, is to do my best in the organization, with the organization I'm working with. And the third feedback I wanted to give you is, we talk a lot about the VUCA world, and in the VUCA world, the four letters, there's the C about complexity. But the complexity isn't in the world. The complexity is in our mind. So even the VUCA is something that we use to maybe have more confidence and trust in ourselves. But the complexity doesn't exist. The world is as it is. The complexity is our perception. We say it's complex, but the word doesn't say it's complex. For the rest, I agree with that. So even that, asking the good questions, as Ariane said before, and be critical in the sense of what do we mean, or are we the kind of person who repeats stuff that we don't even understand. Example, silos. It's been years in companies I've been hearing that, oh, Benoit, we need to break silos. You're a culture expert. Can you help us break silos? Break silos. I haven't seen any silos in any companies. The big wall, I haven't seen that in years. But breaking silos is not a positive objective in itself. Instead of saying, I want to break silos, just tell me what you want to do instead of breaking something. What do you want to build? Few companies talk about building effective collaborations, but they'll prefer to talk about breaking silos. We're never gonna get it. Anyways, these were a few of my point of view about how change an artist. And maybe the last point is that there is a company in a philosopher that brought together philosopher and drawers in Belgium. The company is called Cartoon Base, and he helps in companies to draw, and he works with artists in the corporate world. So he hires artists to draw and to use whatever you call it, comics or design, but to bring something different in companies.
That's great, Benoit. Thank you very much for that. That's a very, again, enlightening response there. And I think what I picked up from that answer of yours there, it was all to do with mindsets in a way and how we see things. And I think sometimes if we are perhaps accustomed to seeing things in a complex way, they will become complex. And I think sometimes altering how we see things is perhaps one way of changing mindsets as well, where we tend to overanalyze, and we don't need to do that because things aren't perhaps as complex as they are. Yeah. And I think this is where some of the values and the attributes that can be brought to the table can help. Peter, I see you're raising your hand there for intervention there.
Yes, just a remark about Benoit's words about silos that don't exist, that it is internally and to build something. I think there's a matter of meaning or purpose that we're looking at right now. And I think we could connect some of what we're talking about here to this wave of great resignation that happens in all branches right now, even among musicians. It's not satisfying anymore just to play the next concert after each other. this big meaning that's missing at the moment. It's a wonderful opportunity for things like this, to search internally in a company for the larger purpose and the meaning we're talking about. And there, I agree totally with Benoit that this is a search for not breaking anything. It's a search for connections. And the same thing you've heard me talk about. It fits so well in the trends right now. We should find a great reassessment of the purpose instead of great resignation.
Absolutely. I think I'm going to, I'm just conscious of time there. So Joanna, you may need to sort of keep us on track here. I just want to add to your Peter point, and then I'll bring you in, Ariane, on that conversation. I think you know what I'm picking up here for me. It's and Ariane, actually, you used the word activate, about activating people a few minutes ago, and then Peter talked about a renaissance, effectively. And for me, it's almost about reactualization now of people, and that renaissance for me is as we are creating the next generation of systems, the future, and the digital world we're going to live in. How do we deal with that? So for me, it's almost I create, therefore I am, because as more and more things are being displaced, where does that leave us as people and as human beings, and the value and the role that we can bring to the table? So it's an interesting element, this, about mindset, complexity, I think activation or self-reactualization through that displacement or that great resignation which is occurring. Ariane?
I'd like to pick up on the question in the chat that Krista has posed, asking what are the important...
Could we come back to that? Because our recommendations will partly answer to that. Could we bring it up at the end? Is it possible?
It's possible, but I'd quite like to very quickly hear what Ariane's response might be to that.
I think that you were mentioning a moment ago the importance of courage. And I think we need courage when we don't know when something is completely new and scary for us. I think that if we have more experience of these kind of cross-sectoral experiences, collaborations early on in universities, much earlier on in training programs at business schools, in law schools, in engineering schools, then this thing won't be so scary. It won't be so weird. But thereby will not need all this quote unquote hard evidence to prove it's going to be perfectly easy and perfectly fine and perfectly smooth, which is not actually. The whole point of something innovative is it's not perfectly easy, perfectly smooth. But I will have more confidence that it's not going to make me feel naked and stupid. It will actually do something and excite me. It will enable me to think in new ways. Because I've already done it. So I think that if we could embed that kind of cross-cultural and cross-sectoral collaboration much earlier in the professional development processes and not wait until later when senior managers have to prove that everything is going to be perfectly fine, I think it'll be easier. I just want to sidestep for one moment. If we think about how much money companies pay to the McKinseys of this world for projects, it's crazy. Do we ever ask for the evidence as harshly as we ask for the evidence of really innovative things that are going to try out something new and different? No. So I think that if we can embed it in earlier into the thinking that it's something quite normal that we think and work together with people from different sectors in order to develop new things, new ideas, new projects, new services, new processes, then I think that we will also do away with many of the problems that we're currently grappling. We build the problems in because we're starting too late in the process.
Brilliant.
Absolutely.
Folks, I'm just conscious of time because I know people will start en masse to exodus, I think, this thing. So, and we don't want to be accused of mismanaging people's time, do we? So I'm just wondering, we need to make a judgment call here regarding how we might want to proceed now.
So basically, I would suggest that we just go quickly over to recommendations to tell a bit about that, because as I said, I think it really corresponds as well. It would be good to bring those up in terms relating to what Ariane said, and then initially to this question. So basically, of course, in order to make this practice to happen, there are established. There are many things that need to be happening. And I mean, the full potential of cross-sector collaboration could be system change in the way that, you know, there would be job creation and alternative and meaningful jobs for artists and designers who could actually use their skills and competencies in ways that would value them. You know, there's this kind of skills matching. There is also for the corporate sector, as now we have heard as well, but the help to deal with changing times with VUCA, with differentiation strategies to fill skills gap among workforce, motivating workforce, etc., etc. And I mean, the practice also relates to, it's very relevant for sustainable development goals as well, thinking in those terms. So we created a set of recommendations, and these are they're directed to policy, corporate and culture, creative sector level. And most of these recommendations are policy level oriented, because we really feel that without action on that level, this practice will fail. And it's really important, as it really needs to be formalized, professionalized and orchestrated. So we have a series of policy recommendations that are rather connected, actually. And of key importance is that the practice is understood and embodied, and there is more into the word embodied than one imagines. It really means that it has to be a framework of people that allows people to actually work and engage and practically engage in what we're talking about. Also, I mean, between artists, between designers, between other culture, creative sector professionals, policymakers, and corporate sector corporate sector representatives. So awareness raising and training exercises should equally definitely happen both in corporate and in culture, creative sectors. We have also talked about, you know, the multidisciplinary and multi-sector hubs that should be further developed, otherwise on a corporate sectoral level. But so coming back to this question, I think that policy part is very, very important in order to make this happen. Besides, of course, looking at this from education and starting with programs that are much more that are created in a much more courage, with much more courage, also as Ariane rightly described it. So yes, please have a look at the recommendations. I hope that you will find further answers there. We felt really that they were precise that we could get after having analyzed everything that we have been analyzing. I think that they are relevant, really. So we can maybe take just the last couple of minutes. It's already 3 minutes past the hour. If there is any other question, possibly from attendees here.
So if our guests have any questions, if you can just post them in the chat channel, and depending on time, you know, we'll see if we can tackle those. Clearly, it's a huge subject area, which doesn't sort of result in one-word answers here. It's very discursive, so we'll see what we can do. So if you do have any questions, do please post them in the chat channel. We'll give that a moment or so, and then if not, we'll probably wrap up then.
Yes.
Ariane. You're on mute.
I just want to add one more point, and I was reminded of it when I saw the message on the side from Sandra Böhr. We've been talking about the corporate sector. I think it's crucial that the public sector gets engaged in these kind of activities as well. So I don't know if you implicitly meant the public sector when you were using the word corporate, not just the business world, but I think that some of the policymakers need to experience this kind of stuff themselves in order to believe in it, in order to understand its potential in society, in all the different aspects of society. We've seen fantastic work being done in hospitals, for example, as well. So I think that we need to make, when we're considering organizations, we need to consider all the different sectors. And there are really powerful experiments, powerful experiences that have been had. And I'm really happy to see that Sandra Bø is here with Art Partners. They've done some fantastic work with very big organizations, and that are extremely inspiring. And I'm sure they're going to have reverberations, for many years to come. So there's stuff already happening. We need to just believe in it, not start the wheel every single time afresh.
Absolutely, totally agree. And I think the answer is yes in terms of what that term covers. So yes, public sector as well, even though we have used the term corporate here. Yeah. Peter.
I will follow up on what Ariane just said, that it's actually easier to get profit-oriented business to understand the value because it's time efficient, all the things we have talked about. When you just get into that, they understand. Who don't understand so well are policymakers, the educational sector. By hugely paradoxically, they don't like to take their own medicine on this sort of microscoping that I mentioned in the beginning. There's and the huge. I mean, it's just to not to criticize in that sense, but just broaden the definition you have of corporate. Corporate means any organization that exists in society that can learn from artistic intervention, policy, parliament, healthcare sector, all kind of businesses, all kind of non-governmental businesses as well.
Very valid contribution. Thank you, Peter. And we'll certainly take on board both that comment and Ariane's. Okay, so Joanna, shall I perhaps wind up now?
Yes, please.
So thank you for, first of all, our very esteemed panel of speakers. We really do appreciate your contribution and your time here today. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to our attendees, many of whom are still with us after the hour. So thank you very much for that. Just before I go, we've had some excellent resources posted on the chat channel. So Elisa Dewell, thank you for that. And thank you for making contact offline as well earlier this week with us. So Elisa's been involved in running some events, I think up in Scotland. And there's a couple of links there and her contact address should any of the other delegates be interested in that. And Elizabeth Mischler, thank you very much for the resources that you've just posted there as well, and to Peter and Ariane for also commenting there. Okay, so I am going to wrap up then. So first of all, thank you very much, everybody, for being here. And we really do hope that you found it a useful session. So something that's not just abstract. So, there's something concrete here and something potentially actionable that is that you can take away. And in fact, the 17 recommendations that we've made in the report and the 15 themes are really intended in that vein. They are to make things actionable and something that we can all respond to. We will be organising further webinars in the future. So if you are interested in taking part as a speaker or contributing, then do get in touch with us regarding that. And, we'll more than welcome contribution. And of course, finally, the report that we've all been talking about today, it is available from the Artisans of Innovation website. The link to that, I think, has been posted 2 or 3 times on the chat channel today. So I think on that note from me, thank you very much, everybody. Joanna, do you have any final?
Not anything else for the moment but saying thank you very much, and I hope to see you in upcoming webinar. And again, thank you so much to the speakers.
Brilliant. So here's a real wave in a virtual world.
Yes. Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.